Hello, my friends. Welcome back. I hope you are having a calm and peaceful day. Today, I would like to share with you a very special story. It is the story of a queen. This queen lived more than 2,000 years ago. She was beautiful and deeply intelligent. She could speak many languages with ease. But her life was not simple. Her story is filled with love, with power, and with danger. Can you imagine living in a palace beside the sea? Can you imagine meeting the most powerful men in the world? This queen lived that life. Her name was Cleopatra. If you enjoy learning English through stories like this, please subscribe to English Espresso. Your support helps us bring you more meaningful stories for your English journey. Chapter 1. A Queen is Born. Cleopatra was born in the year 69 BC, in a land of ancient mystery and power. She was born in Egypt, in the magnificent city of Alexandria. Alexandria was not an ordinary place. It stood beside the wide blue sea, a city glowing with beauty, ambition, and knowledge. Tall structures rose proudly toward the sky, their shadows stretching across busy streets. There were great libraries, filled with thousands of scrolls and books. Knowledge from across the world lived there: science, philosophy, history, and art. Scholars, thinkers, and artists traveled from distant lands, all gathering in one place. It was a city alive with ideas, a city where minds never rested. Cleopatra was born into a royal family. Her father was Ptolemy XII, a ruler of great ambition, but limited strength. Yet her family was not truly Egyptian. They were Greek, descendants of the empire built by Alexander the Great. Long before Cleopatra's birth, his generals had taken control of Egypt and ruled it for nearly 300 years. So although Cleopatra was queen of Egypt, her blood carried the legacy of Greece. She grew up with brothers and sisters, but royal life was far from peaceful. In her family, marriage between siblings was common. It was believed to protect royal blood and maintain power within the dynasty. But this tradition brought tension. It created rivalry and deep mistrust. Brothers competed against brothers. Sisters turned against sisters. Love was often replaced by ambition. And within the palace walls, one truth remained constant. Everyone desired power. Everyone wanted the throne. Chapter 2. A Mind Unlike Others. From a very young age, Cleopatra showed a deep love for learning. While others in the palace enjoyed comfort and luxury, she chose books, questions, and long hours of study. She explored many subjects with patience and with curiosity. She learned to read and to write, not just in one language, but in several. Greek was natural to her, the language of her family and her court. But she went further. She learned Egyptian, the language of her people. And this was rare. Most rulers in her dynasty never made this effort. They believed the native language was unimportant, something beneath their attention. But Cleopatra saw things differently. She wanted to speak directly to her people, without translators, without distance. She wanted to be understood, and in return, to earn their respect. Her studies did not stop with language. She explored science, seeking to understand how the world worked. She studied mathematics, training her mind to think with precision. She reflected on philosophy, asking deeper questions about life, power, and meaning. She appreciated music, finding rhythm even in the structure of thought. She read widely and intensely. Some believe she studied within the influence of the great Library of Alexandria, one of the greatest centers of knowledge in the ancient world. She questioned everything. She listened. She observed. She thought. She did not want to simply rule Egypt. She wanted to understand it. People began to notice. They spoke of her intelligence, her sharp memory, her ability to learn faster than anyone around her. Some said she was the most brilliant mind in the palace, perhaps even in all of Egypt. But knowledge alone could not protect a kingdom, because beyond the palace walls, Egypt was already in danger. Chapter 3. A kingdom under threat. Egypt was still a land of great wealth, its rivers full, its cities alive, its treasures admired. But beneath this surface, its strength was fading. The kingdom was no longer as powerful as it once had been. Far away, across the sea, in the land of Italy, a city was rising. That city was Rome. Rome was growing, not just in size, but in power. Its armies marched across continents, conquering lands, and expanding its influence. One by one, nations fell under Roman control. And with each victory, fear of Rome spread further. Many kingdoms watched and worried. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy the XII, understood this danger. He knew Egypt could not fight Rome directly. So instead, he chose diplomacy. He tried to remain on good terms with Rome. He sent them gold. He offered them valuable gifts. He tried to secure their favor. But Rome did not respect him. They saw him as weak. Some even mocked him, calling him a ruler who played music instead of protecting his kingdom. Then, everything changed. When Cleopatra was just 18 years old, her father died. The year was 51 BC. Now, she stood at the center of power. She became Queen of Egypt. But her rule was not absolute. There was a condition, a tradition that could not be ignored. She had to share the throne with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. He was only 10 years old, too young to rule, yet still a king. This was the custom of their dynasty, a king and a queen, ruling together. But Cleopatra did not welcome this arrangement. She was intelligent, decisive, and ready to lead. Her brother was still a child. And in a kingdom filled with danger, shared power could quickly become a battlefield. Chapter 4. Exile and Determination. At first, the rule of Cleopatra and her brother appeared calm, almost stable. But beneath this surface, power was not shared equally. Cleopatra held control. She made the important decisions. She managed foreign relations. She directed the wealth of the kingdom. Her voice carried authority. Her brother, Ptolemy XIII, remained in the background, young and easily influenced, and this created tension. His advisors were not satisfied. They did not want a strong queen. They wanted control for themselves. They saw opportunity in the young king. To them, he was not a ruler. He was a tool, a puppet they could guide, a voice they could control. So slowly, carefully, they began to act. They whispered doubts into the ears of the people. They spread fear. They created suspicion. They questioned Cleopatra's intentions. They painted her as dangerous, as someone who threatened tradition. Little by little, public opinion began to shift. Support for her weakened, and after 3 years of growing conflict, they forced her out. Cleopatra was driven from Egypt. She fled east toward the lands of Syria. She was only 21 years old, and in a single moment, she had lost her throne, her power, her home. But she did not break. She did not accept defeat. In exile, she began to think. Carefully, strategically, she knew what she needed: an army, allies, resources, power. She spoke with regional leaders. She negotiated. She promised rewards. She gathered soldiers, one by one. Her strength began to grow again. This was not the end of her story. It was only a pause, because Cleopatra was preparing to return and to reclaim what had once been hers. Chapter 5. A meeting that changed history. While Cleopatra lived in exile, far from her throne, history was already moving toward her. A man had arrived in Egypt, a man whose name carried power across continents: Julius Caesar. He was not just a general, he was a force, shaping the future of Rome itself. But he did not come to Egypt in peace. He was hunting his enemy, Pompey, a rival, a former ally, a man now running for his life. Pompey fled to Egypt, believing he would find protection there. But Egypt was no longer a place of safety. The moment he arrived, he was betrayed, killed, before he could even speak. When Caesar reached Alexandria, he was not pleased. This was not victory. This was dishonor. Still, he remained. Inside the royal palace, watching, waiting, deciding what would come next. And far away, Cleopatra heard the news. This was her moment. If she could reach Caesar, everything could change. But Alexandria was no longer her city. Her enemies controlled every gate, every street, every guard. Walking in openly meant death. So she chose something else, something bold, something dangerous, something unforgettable. One night, under the cover of silence, a small boat slipped through the dark waters toward the palace. A single man stepped out, carrying a large carpet, a gift for Caesar. The guards allowed him through. Inside the palace, the carpet was placed on the floor, and slowly, it was unrolled. What emerged was not cloth. It was Cleopatra, alive, fearless. She had hidden herself inside, risking everything, for one chance. Caesar looked at her, surprised, then intrigued. This was no ordinary queen. She spoke to him in Latin, her voice calm, precise, controlled. She did not beg. She did not hesitate. She explained. She persuaded. She commanded attention. And Caesar listened. Not just to her words, but to her presence. He saw her intelligence, her courage, her unshakable ambition. In that moment, something shifted. An alliance began. Was it love? Was it strategy? Or something far more complex? Perhaps it was both. Chapter 6. War and Victory. Caesar made his choice. Not in secret, but in full view of power. He stood with Cleopatra. He declared it clearly. She was the rightful ruler of Egypt. But power never yields without a fight. Her brother's advisors refused. They would not step aside. They would not lose control. And so, war began. It came fast. It came hard. The palace was surrounded, then struck. Walls trembled. Shouts echoed through stone corridors. Steel clashed against steel. Inside, Cleopatra and Caesar were trapped. With them, only a small force. Outside, an army waited. The siege tightened. Day by day, hope grew thinner. Then, the fire began. Near the harbor, flames rose into the sky. Ships burned. Smoke swallowed the horizon. And in that chaos, something was lost. Some say the great library of Alexandria was touched by the flames, its endless knowledge fading into ash. But what truly vanished that night, history may never fully remember. Still, the war did not stop. Weeks turned into months. Hunger pressed in. Fear lingered in every shadow. But Cleopatra did not break, and Caesar did not retreat. They endured. They waited. And then, everything changed. From the distance, Roman reinforcements arrived. Fresh soldiers, fresh strength. The balance shifted, suddenly, completely. The enemy lines collapsed. Battle turned into defeat. Ptolemy, the young king, ran. He fled toward the Nile, his last hope. But the river offered no escape. His boat overturned, and the waters closed over him. Just like that, his rule was gone. Silence followed. The war was over. And from the smoke, from the fire, from the edge of defeat, Cleopatra rose again. Not as a fugitive, not as a challenger, but as the undisputed queen of Egypt. Chapter 7. Love, Power, and Loss. For a moment, the war was over, and in its silence, something unexpected began. Cleopatra and Caesar spent time together, not as rivals, not as survivors, but as two minds, drawn toward each other. They traveled along the Nile, the ancient river that had witnessed centuries of kings. Golden light touched the water. Temples passed in silence, and there they spoke. About history, about science, about the future they imagined. It was not just power that connected them. It was curiosity. It was vision. And perhaps something more. Then, a new life entered the story. Cleopatra had a son. She named him Caesarion, Little Caesar. A name filled with meaning. A name filled with ambition. To Cleopatra, he was more than a child. He was a symbol, a future, a bridge between Egypt and Rome. Later, she made a bold decision. She traveled to Rome, not quietly, but with purpose. She stayed near Caesar. She allowed herself to be seen. But Rome was watching. And Rome did not trust her. Many Romans whispered in anger. They did not like foreign queens. They did not like her influence over Caesar. To them, she was not an ally. She was a threat. Tension grew, quietly, dangerously. And then, everything shattered. In 44 BC, Julius Caesar was assassinated. Not in battle, not by enemies from afar, but by men he knew. Roman senators surrounded him and struck. Again and again, until the most powerful man in Rome fell to the ground. The world changed in a single moment. But something else died with him that day. Something Rome would never fully recover. Cleopatra understood immediately. Rome was no longer safe. Power was shifting. Chaos was rising. Without delay, she returned to Egypt, to her throne, to her kingdom. But this time, the future was unclear. The man who had protected her was gone. And what would come next? No one could control. Chapter 8. Mark Antony and the Final Conflict. After Caesar's death, Rome did not find peace. It fell into another struggle for power. Alliances shifted. Trust collapsed. Ambition rose once again. Among those who stepped forward was a man named Mark Antony, a general, a warrior, a man who had stood beside Caesar. Now, he controlled the eastern territories of Rome. But power requires more than armies. It requires wealth. And Egypt was still rich. So Antony made his move. He sent a message. Cleopatra was to meet him. It was not a request. It was a test. And Cleopatra understood this. She did not arrive quietly. She arrived with intention. Her ship moved across the water, slow, deliberate, unforgettable. Its sails were deep purple. Its surfaces shone with gold. The air carried perfume. Music echoed across the river, and at the center of it all stood Cleopatra, dressed like a goddess, not just to be seen, but to be remembered. When Antony saw her, he was captivated, not only by her beauty, but by her presence, her confidence, her command. Once again, Cleopatra had changed the room without speaking a word. They met. They spoke. And soon, they formed an alliance. But this was more than politics. It was connection. It was desire. It was strategy, woven together. History became personal again. They spent time together. They shared power. And in time, they had children. A future that tied Egypt and Rome even closer. But far away, in Rome, another man was watching. Octavian, young, patient, dangerous. He did not attack with swords, he attacked with words. He spoke to the people. He shaped their thoughts. Slowly, carefully, he turned Rome against Antony. He accused him of betrayal. He claimed Antony had forgotten Rome for a foreign queen. He painted Cleopatra not as an ally but as a threat, and the people listened. Opinion shifted, trust faded, and tension turned into something unavoidable. And this time, the war would decide more than power. It would decide the fate of Egypt itself.
Chapter 9. The Fall. In 31 BC, the final chapter of power began to unfold. Far from the palaces of Egypt, on the open waters near Actium, a great naval battle took place. It was not just a fight between armies. It was a battle for the future of the known world. On one side, Cleopatra and Mark Antony. On the other, Octavian. 3 forces. 3 ambitions. 1 inevitable end. The sea carried their ships, heavy with soldiers, weapons, and fate. Waves crashed softly, as if unaware of what was about to happen. Then, the battle began. Sails turned, oars struck the water. Commands echoed across the wind. For hours, they fought. But slowly, the truth became clear. They were losing. Octavian's forces were stronger, more organized, more prepared. And in that moment of chaos, something unexpected happened. Cleopatra's ships turned, not forward, but away. They began to retreat. Why she made that choice, history still questions. Was it fear? Was it strategy? Was it survival? No one knows for certain, but Antony saw her leave, and he followed. In that single decision, the battle was lost. Their fleet abandoned. Their soldiers left behind. Many surrendered. Others were destroyed. And just like that, the war was over. Cleopatra and Antony returned to Egypt. But this time, there was no plan left. No army strong enough. No ally willing to help. Only time, slowly running out. Soon, Octavian followed. Step by step, he closed the distance. Until finally, defeat was no longer a possibility. It was certain. Inside Egypt, hope began to collapse. And then, a rumor spread. A whisper that changed everything. Cleopatra was dead. When Antony heard it, something inside him broke. The war was gone. The future was gone. And now, so was she. In despair, he made his final decision. He took his sword and turned it against himself. But the rumor was not true. Cleopatra was still alive. When Antony was brought to her, he was dying, weak, fading. He looked at her one last time, and in her arms, he died. The man who had once commanded armies, now reduced to silence. Now, Cleopatra stood alone.
Chapter 10. The Final Choice. The end came quietly. Not with battle, but with control. Octavian entered Egypt, and this time, there was no resistance. Cleopatra was captured. Not as a queen, but as a prisoner. Yet Octavian did not treat her harshly. He was careful. He knew her value. He knew her story. And he had a plan. He would take her to Rome. Not as an ally, not as a ruler, but as a symbol of victory. She would be displayed in chains before the people. For a queen, this was unbearable. To live without power was one thing, but to live without dignity was impossible. Cleopatra understood her fate, and she refused to accept it. So she made a final choice, a choice no one could take from her. On August 12th, in the year 30 BC, Cleopatra died. She was 39 years old. The details remain a mystery. Some say a snake delivered the poison, a silent strike, a royal symbol. Others believe it was prepared carefully, a hidden poison, a controlled ending. But the method was never the true story. The truth is simpler, stronger. She chose her end, not Octavian, not Rome, her. And in that final moment, when everything else had been taken, she held on to the one thing that remained. Control. Chapter 11. Legacy of a Queen. With Cleopatra's death, an era ended. Egypt, once powerful, once independent, fell into silence. It became part of the Roman Empire. No longer a kingdom, no longer a sovereign land. Cleopatra was the last pharaoh. After her, there were no more. But her story did not disappear. Time moved forward. Empires rose and fell. Centuries passed, and still her name remained. More than 2,000 years later, we still remember Cleopatra. But why? Why does her story survive when so many others are forgotten? Because she was different. She was not just a queen, she was intelligent, strategic, fearless. She spoke many languages. She studied deeply. She understood power, not just as force, but as influence. She did not rely only on beauty. She used her mind, her voice, her presence. Yes, she made mistakes. Yes, some of her choices failed, but she never stopped fighting. Not in exile, not in war, not even at the end. And that is why her story still lives, not just as history, but as a reminder. That power is not given. It is taken, built, defended. And sometimes, even in defeat, it is chosen. Final reflection. Today, as we learn English, we are doing something powerful. We are opening doors. We are connecting with the world. Just like Cleopatra, we are learning to communicate beyond boundaries. Every word you learn is a step forward. Every story you hear makes you stronger. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to English Espresso. And until next time, keep learning, keep listening, and keep enjoying the beautiful journey of English.